during that time, you guys can set up some coaching sessions. So if you just want to go over how you're going to present or what you're going to say with each slide, you can do that. You can also send us your decks and we will give you pretty quick and dirty feedback. What I have seen hundreds, if not thousands of decks. And what I can tell you in general is that the problem slide is often too wordy. It should be very clear. It should be an easily identifiable problem. The solution is often not related to the problem, and it should. If you're going to specify two problems, you should have two aspects to your solution that address those problems. And the market research, which I think we've already done that session, right? That needs to be in dollars and it needs to be researched. And so if you need help with that, Patrick Griffiths is still available to help you. So I know that was Patrick Griffiths. Yes, Madeline, can you put that in the chat too? It's Patrick, P-A-T-R-I-C-K .Griffiths, G-R-I-F-F-I-S at unlv.edu. Yes, so you can write to him and say that you were in one of our classes, but the more specific information you can give him, the better the research he can provide you. So if you're too general, it's very hard for him to understand what it is that you're after. So if you can ask specific questions, it's definitely easier for him.
Can we practice here? Slide there, we just go with it, or
can you practice here? I don't.
I can practice at home.
Yeah.
Here, how would that be set?
Oh, it'll be set up much like it is right here. You'll have the podium, you'll have the remote, you'll have a microphone. Yeah. Hi, Sal. Patrick Griffiths. It's P-A-T-R-I-C-K .Griffiths, G-R-I-F-F-I-S at unlv.edu.
That last name is G-R-I.
I-S, like is.
And that's it.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Are there some post questions that we should kind of prepare for afterwards?
Oh no, we don't have time for questions. There's so many of you.
Okay.
Anybody else? Questions?
Yeah, it's just that there's a lot of you, and so we're trying to give you options. So the sign up is this center, and so there's time slots.
It's always exciting for me, so please do demo day.
So that is session 10. We're going to talk about pitch decks. I know it doesn't give you guys much time to, but you have a whole week. So from the Wednesday that our last session is, it's the following Friday and Saturday that are demo days. And, you know, the guys did so well last year. I won't say guys, but like I had a team of 2 women and they did a great job. Everybody did a great job last year. It was really appreciated. So we had somebody from Clark County. This is a Clark County program. Somebody from Clark County was here and she was like really getting into it with how the presentations were going. And there was one guy who wanted to start a gay nudist camp and he couldn't do it in Nevada. And he had to go just across the border into Arizona. And she was very insulted by that. So then she started giving him ideas of how he could make it work in Nevada. But I think it had to do with the camping that he wanted to, like he had to build infrastructure for pumps and stuff like that. I don't know why he had a hard time, but he had identified a nice property on the other side of the border. So it was, you know, Nevada adjacent.
She was so offended that it wasn't easy for him because he went through the process that he had to go to the county, and she was like, this is terrible. Like, this is a great idea and it shouldn't be this hard. So I think she reached out to him directly and started to kind of get his input and to see how she can make it better. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. And You'd be surprised at how nervous specifically that gentleman was, and he killed it, like killed it. I was,
Yeah, he did
blown
a really,
away.
he was the last guy.
Yeah,
And
because
he
he
did
was
a
so
great
nervous.
job.
Yeah.
There was another fellow who has a company called The Sound of Cheesecake. So he's a jazz musician and he
Oh,
wants to have a cheesecake bar. And so he brought samples. So everybody got cheesecake.
best thing ever.
Yeah.
It was so good.
Yeah.
A quick follow-up question from online.
Yes.
Maggie, you mentioned that because there are so many presentations, we won't be doing a Q&A. And someone wanted to clarify, do you have 8 minutes total? And if you weren't pitching for the entire 8 minutes, could you do some questions? Or should it be just an 8-minute pitch? No question.
The program is an 8-minute pitch. So you should have enough to talk about for 8 minutes. You're not going to get skating through that easily. No, with the 8 different topics that we have you cover, you should be able to fill 8 minutes. No problem.
For anybody in the room, if you guys have a question tonight, hold on, Maggie.
gotta
If
tap
you
that.
guys have a question tonight, please raise your hand. And I'll just come out there with the mic to help Maggie out.
Okay, so tonight it's financials and sales. They don't actually go together. I'm not sure why they're grouped together in this program, but we're going to cover what the slides say. So when it comes to understanding the numbers of your business, you're going to make assumptions, you're going to predict stuff, you're going to measure, record, collate information, you're going to analyze it, and then you're going to start this process over again. And so you're probably going to be doing it at least annually to make projections. And this is an area where I find a lot of founders don't want to spend the time on their financials to understand how their business is doing. Especially some like Main Street businesses where they're so busy just like trying to sling the hash and get people fed that the receipts keep coming in. They keep buying the food and stuff. And so if they don't have somebody who's actually minding the store, actually keeping track of your expenses and your income, then it's very easy to get 8 or 12 months down the road and not understand that you're losing money. And that if you just simply raise some of your prices, you would be in the black. So it's an important aspect. And if you don't understand it, then you should be hiring somebody who does. So financial management, it's made up of these 3 main documents here: an income statement, also called a profit and loss, a balance sheet, and that kind of takes a snapshot of your business at any point in time. And it shows your assets and your liabilities and your equity. And it gives you an idea of the health of your business. And then the cash flow statement. And that's like what it sounds for: cash coming in, cash going out. All right, so the income statement shows whether or not you're profitable. It can be a monthly, a quarterly, an annual, an all-time kind of thing. And so if you're doing this in a spreadsheet, it takes a lot of tedium to keep that up to date. It even takes tedium if you're doing it in a piece of software. And if you're outsourcing it to somebody else, you have to have a way for them to get the information so that they can be recording it and they have all the tedium on their plate. So it shows, well, what you're spending money on and what you're getting in revenue. So yes, I'm having a hard time saying this. Oh, that one's much clearer. That one's not. Okay, so I call it a P&L, and for our business, we look at it every month, but mostly quarterly and then annually. And it could depend on if you have a board, how often you're having those board meetings. That's when the rubber meets the road. You're really going to have to get your statements in order so that you can present this information to the board. And again, if you don't do it, then your financial person has to. So they have to be able to answer questions about it. All right, here is a simplified income statement. It has net sales. That's your revenue. That's the money you're bringing in. And then your cost of goods sold. And that's all the ingredients that go into whatever it is that you're selling. And then that gives you your gross income. And then you take away expenses. So in case you're wondering, if you have an expense to ship your product to somebody, that's not part of cost of goods sold. If you had to pay freight to get your ingredients to you, that is part of cost of goods sold. All right, and then if you take the net sales and you subtract out your operating expenses, actually gross income, minus operating expenses, you get your operating income. And then there are these other expenses like interest and amortization and other things. And then you'll get down here to net income. All right, the balance sheet. Now this, I said, would show a moment in time the health of your company. And so it includes all of your assets, and assets are cash or things that can be converted to cash within a year. So if you had heavy equipment that you could sell, then that would be considered an asset. If you have income, accounts receivable, and you expect to collect it within a year, that is an asset. Liabilities are the things where you owe people. So you can owe on a loan, you can owe, what other kind of liabilities are? You know, you could have a line of credit, which would be a liability. You could have a car and that has a loan on it, and that's a liability. Anything where you owe other people money. If you're, Sarah, do you do SaaS?
Like,
Yeah. Okay, so there's something called revenue recognition. And so sometimes with SaaS, you're getting a lot of money up front, but you can't recognize the revenue until you have provided the service. So there are a lot of rules around this stuff. And if that's your business, you should learn about it because it's your responsibility. You can't recognize it as revenue, but it is a receivable, but it could be a longer term receivable, depends on how your contract was written. Right. It's just in limbo.
We should really have an accountant.
A bookkeeper at any rate. And if you are going to use a piece of software like QuickBooks, you should pay the money up front to make sure that it's set up correctly, because it can be nasty to try to untangle it and set it up right after a year or two. So this is one of those expenses that's really worth it to get it set up right. Oh, yes. Yeah, Rakshana was slow getting the microphone over to Sarah.
I thought that Sarah has a comment.
So
Yeah, so this lady's question was, actually, what was your question?
Do you need to have an accountant at this point?
Do you need to have an accountant? And yeah, so my advice was, yes, it's worth the money to get somebody who either really knows QuickBooks and understands business so they can set you up with the right accounts, or to actually pay a CPA to do this.
and if I can add that another reason why to do this is it will make tax time so much easier, because essentially all this stuff will need to be calculated at the end of the year or quarterly when you do your taxes. So you really want to have whoever's doing your taxes be able to do this. So either your bookkeeper, if a person can do taxes, or your CPA. It's really,
Yeah, so the CPAs generally, they cost more because they've gotten certified. So, but if you have a bookkeeper or somebody that once you have it set up correctly, they're the ones that are doing the daily TDM, and then you can export it in a backup and send it to your CPA for taxes, that should not be a problem. So the day-to-day kind of stuff can be handled by somebody who has just a good understanding of numbers and spreadsheets and expenses. But when it comes down to the stuff where you can go to jail, hire somebody. Yes, so your assets are your liabilities plus equity. Equity is what you own in something. So for example, you buy a $30,000 car, you put $5,000 down, you finance the other $25,000. The $5,000 that you've paid into it is your equity. So you own that part of the equity, and then your liability would be the loan that you have to pay back, which is the $25,000. All right, and when we get into shareholder equity, owner's equity, then that comes under the equity part of things. So if you start your business with $25,000 from you and $25,000 from your partner, then you want to be keeping track of that from the very beginning. So here is a very simple balance sheet. We've got current assets. Current assets are the ones that can be converted to cash within a year. A non-current asset is one that it would take longer to convert into cash. Same thing is true of liabilities. Current is within a year, longer term is longer than a year. And then equity is whatever you make it. The value of the company after liabilities have been deducted. Examples include any contributed capital, like those two partners, retained earnings, which is the cumulative net incomes or losses of the company, and the owners or investors' draws. So this stuff can get very complex, and so it's really not great to talk about it in this really cursory way, but it is, I have to stress, it's really important that you get this stuff right. All right, so a cash flow statement that reports all the cash that flows into and out of your business over a period of time. Cash flow projections are something that investors are very interested in, especially forward-looking cash flow statements. So they want to see what your expenses have been, and then they want to see what your projections are. The ending cash on the cash flow statement will tie to the cash and equivalents on the balance sheet. I don't know what these red marks are for. Oh, and then there's that. It'll go away, right? Okay. All right, so here is a simplified cash flow statement. Your beginning cash balance from whatever the last period was. If it's going to be a year, that's like your leftover from last year, beginning cash. Total cash in, $598. Total cash available is the sum. Cash out, that's what you paid for. And your net cash flow is, of course, the one subtracted from the other. And that's your ending cash balance for whatever the period is. Yes? Oh, yes, ma'am.
Oh, good.
That's why she's looking at you.
Sorry, so the question is, do you need to have a certified,
Public accountant?
no, well, CPA, but does this need to, the statements, do they need to be certified in some sort of way? If you're dealing with investors, like, so that all these numbers are real and not inflated, or
Well,
do you?
the investors have a burden to do due diligence, and so they're going to look over all of your financials. And if you, I mean, if they are considering investment in you, it's up to them to ask you for whatever backup they feel they need. So you should be honest.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, but I was just wondering if there was some official something, but that would most likely come from the CPA.
Yeah, if you needed official stuff, then you would get it from a CPA. You could have an audit done, but that's like way expensive, and it's probably not something you have to worry about right away.
Oh, no.
Okay, now suddenly we're in sales. Okay, so let's close the financial stuff by saying it's very important. You can't let it go. You can't be lazy about it. You have to, even if you don't understand everything about it, you have to have somebody who does, who can teach you about it, and who can answer questions of anybody who needs to know. Your board members, or if you are looking for an investor, somebody who can be the point person to discuss all that stuff and provide the information. It's like wasn't there a golfer, or was it an international basketball player where his interpreter got funky with the financials? Baseball? Yeah. So it's important, no matter, even if you're, an individual of celebrity, still important. All right, sales projections. Now, sales projections are something that your investors, potential investors, are going to be interested in, and probably also your board members. So sales, I actually don't like the way that they go about this, but they say there are 3 different ways: comparative, average, and bottom up. So sales plus the cost of the product or service equals gross profit minus operating expenses gets you net income. Did I make these red stripes? No,
No,
they're on every slide.
they're literally on every slide.
Okay.
I don't know what happened, Maggie.
Okay. So projecting things is critical, but it's just a guess. Okay, so you can look at past history and you create a trend line and you can continue that trend line, and that's a reasonable way to do it. It's very defensible for your projections. If you know you're going to goose a bunch of advertising and you project a big spike, that's reasonable too. So how do we go about this? So the comparative sales approach relies on the research that you've done and looking at your competitors. And that's fine if they're public companies. It's really hard to do if they're private companies. So you're just kind of guessing what your competitors are making in terms of sales. So that's why I don't really like this approach, but that's me. The average sales approach. So this is using industry research again and counting the number of sales transactions you expect over a specified period. Again, to me, this is very loosey-goosey. I would rather just make assumptions based on what I know about my products. And you're guessing, and everybody knows that. Oh, also, 60 customers times $15 times 365 days. Are you working 365 days? I hope not. Then here's the bottom-up sales approach. This is more mathematical, and that's true. This is where you're actually going to understand your business completely. Remember, I said that SOM was hard. This is part of SOM. It is hard. You have to know what it costs for your product. You have to know what you're selling it for. If you have more than one product, you kind of have to make a guess about which one is going to be your best seller and which one is going to be less, or if you have other products. You're trying to guess, but hopefully you did some research on the different products that you're developing to know which ones have demand in the marketplace. And you may not actually know which will be your bestseller, but you might know just by asking questions when you're out there doing your validation questions, which one has the most enthusiasm for it. And I would base it on that. When you're actually talking to potential customers and they have enthusiasm for a product and they have some enthusiasm for the next one and a little bit less for the other one, I would kind of go based on that and make these sales projections. So if you were expecting, and you can be really conservative, I always recommend being conservative. You can even, if you want to, you can be conservative and then have a better case sort of scenario. I do not recommend a best case because you're really fooling yourself then. So just fool yourself a little bit. I don't know. I don't know what that they're for. Sorry.
We have no idea how the red marks
The
popped
question
up
was about the
there.
red marks here.
Yeah, whoever created this deck, I don't think they realized that they had made marks.
Yeah.
We'll fix it later. Sorry.
Yeah, don't look at the elephant in the room. Don't look at those red marks. Okay, so this is the commit module. And so, yeah, this is when you are really getting into it. You're doing financials, you're doing sales projections, your cost projections. So there are costs associated with just starting up, and then there's your costs associated with creating your product and the costs that are going into your actual product. So we're going to look at some of the different startup costs that you should consider. They should be in your book. Keep going. And so you have to think about these things. There's quite a long list of them. Any security deposits? Are you going to be operating out of your home? Because you have far fewer expenses that way. But you can, if you are operating out of your home, take a tax deduction for that being part of your business. So check into how you have to account for that. There is a formula for it. If you're going to be in a space, what your rent deposit is, that's just going to sit there. That's an asset, right? That's just sitting there, but you own it, assuming you're going to get it back. Equipment, do you have to buy equipment to get your stuff done? Furniture and fixtures, you know, things like podiums and computers and things. And these all, the capital expenditures may have an amortization schedule. And last I checked, computers were 5 years. Are they still? A computer? It has like a 5-year life, except that you know that it's outdated after 2. So, but you can depreciate it. Telephone deposit, if you have to do that. Most people own their phones now, so it's not as much of a thing anymore. Leasehold improvements. So if you are going into a space and it's just a blank space and you need it built out with equipment for a kitchen or equipment for desks and cubicles and things like that, those are tenant improvements. And so those are going to be expensive. You may have utility deposits. You may buy vehicles. You may buy land and buildings and have to improve them, like the fellow with the nudist camp. He needed the land. He had to pour concrete pads. He had to dig a well. He had a lot of things that he had to do as capital improvements to his land to get his business off the ground. Okay. So you can answer these questions to figure out what of these estimated costs may apply to you. Okay, when you're building something, you're actually like making something, you will want to cost out all of the component parts that go into your product. And what you're going to find in most cases is that if you buy a small quantity, it costs more per unit. When you get to scale where you can buy thousands of them, the price is going to go down dramatically. And so that could mean that when you start offering your product for sale, the price is going to be higher than it will be in 3 years if it catches on, because you'll be making more of them and you'll get economies of scale in the component parts that you're putting together. So lots of different considerations. So are these listed in your book? You do get the slide deck, and you also get, no, it doesn't look like they're in there. We also have a link on the Canvas website to a financial model that is put together by a Kaufman. To me, again, they make that more complex than it needs to be, but it's trying to accommodate a lot of different types of business. So when you look at the different tabs of this spreadsheet, a lot of them will say, put this information here, put this information here, and you don't need to fill out every block in there. It may not apply to you, but it will give you a pretty good idea of how to create a cost projection and a sales projection. And I don't think that actually has a P&L or a balance statement in there. Okay, marketing. I think I mentioned in the SOM talk, TAMSAM SOM talk, that as you decide what your next market is going to be, you're going to do things like research. What does it cost to advertise in the different potential second markets or third markets? And so it's not the same across the board. So you will want to do this research for your very first market, of course, also, but you could have maybe 4 or 5 different potential markets where you can do this sort of research. And also know that if you go into a secondary market, you may have to hire people there. You may not. You may be able to service them just by shipping from where you're located or making your app available. But the advertising could be different in different areas. Okay, here we are back to cost of goods sold. And this should be a C. So COGS is often referred to. That's labor and the cost of materials and parts. That equals your cost of goods sold. And then labor and the cost of direct supplies is cost of sales. So adding raw material costs and production costs together results in the total COGS. I got it right down here. Interesting. Okay, 3 types of operating expenses: research and development. And there is still a tax credit called the research, I think it's called the R&D tax credit. And so if you are in a technology company and you're spending money to do R&D, research and development, then there is a tax credit available to you. You should ask your CPA about that. A lot of companies don't know that and they're missing out on deducting that. Sales and marketing, and then general and administrative. So sales and marketing, it's the cost of people too, as well as advertising. So in each one of these, there are people expenses and there are hard expenses. Yeah, there is a research and development tax credit that's available to tech companies. And so if you just search on Google research tax credit, you should be able to find information about it. Intellectual property, I have no idea why this shows up here. I think we've already done some legal stuff. But intellectual property includes trademarks, copyrights, patents, trade secrets, and confidential information. So this is just another sort of asset that you want to be protecting. You can, I think, sometimes assign an actual value to your IP that could show up in your balance statement. All right. So these are sort of the differences. Brand name and logo are trademarked. Artwork is copyrighted. Design is patented. Formulas and processes are trade secrets, like the Coke recipe, the KFC recipe. And financial performance is confidential information. It's confidential in that you expect your employees to keep it confidential. And so there can be agreements that you have with your employees about protecting all of those things. And even for copyrights, there are agreements that you can make that if you're working for a company, whatever they devise or create is owned by the company and not by them individually. So you need to get a lawyer involved in that.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, Sarah is getting a microphone now. Let us
I-
know if you can't hear her.
I think the reason why this is in the financials is on a balance sheet, this may be something that goes under goodwill, which is basically an intangible asset. And these would be examples of intangible assets that you would have on your balance sheet.
Yeah, arriving at the amount for those things can be difficult. Again, you can consult with somebody who understands these things. All right, and then we also have here laws, regulations, and contracts. So financials and these contracts and compliance and licensing, these are all things that will get you in jail if you don't do them right. Or they could. You might skate for a while, but it's serious stuff. All right, any questions? Yes, ma'am. Oh, wait.
Please, oh, please.
And then hold that and talk into it.
Can you give an example of artwork that can be copyrighted versus not?
You can pretty much copyright anything that you want to copyright, but if you have a logo, you can copyright that. Let's see, let's think. There's like the shape of the Coca-Cola bottle. I think have they trademarked it or copyrighted it? They've protected it.
Is there, I read somewhere that when it comes to like fashion and jewelry, you can't really copyright that
Yeah.
because it's, I mean, I guess everything's kind of derivative on something else. So like yeah, it's hard to.
Yeah, but I know
Right.
that like Paloma Picasso, who's a jewelry designer, she's able to copyright her stuff. So there are
Mhm.
things that are copyrightable.
Okay. What's the differentiation? Do you know? Like, is there a guideline?
You'd have to ask an attorney.
The attorney's gonna charge me though.
An attorney probably would charge you, but sometimes we have, office hours and mentors. You can ask a question like that. She's just blocked in here. She can't get over
Oh,
there.
okay.
Questions?
Sarah? Mm-hmm. Want me to go back to the beautiful sign? with
Yeah,
the-
so I've heard, seeing some of the investors, if you don't understand kind of the regulatory and compliance of your business for those that are under that. I've seen a lot of investors ask questions around that. So it's really important that you actually understand if you're under any kind of regulatory compliance or state type of stuff. So just kind of something to keep in mind.
Yeah, you should know the laws that apply to you. For example, for IncubAteNV, which finished at the end of April, we had one company that had an advertising sign. It was lit up in the back window of rideshare cars. And there is a law that you cannot cause a distraction on the freeway. And so it can't move. So it can be a stationary sign, but that's not how this is designed. This is designed to show an ad for a certain amount of time and then switch and show another one. So he was actually asked a lot of questions around that regulation because it's not just in Nevada, it's in a lot of different states. So you can't cause a nuisance that could cause accidents. And so his response was that he had it geofenced so that with GPS, they would know when they were on the freeways. Although how many times have you been on the road and it thinks you're on the freeway and you're not, you're on the perimeter road. So better safe than sorry. But there are like just little niggling things like that. Of course, if you're in any sort of medical or device, there's all sorts of regulations and you should know about that because that's your industry. Things like, if you're a hairdresser, you have to have a license. Okay, so there's different licensing regulations, and it's the Secretary of State's office that knows about that. Department of Business and Industry, which I shared with you guys. So Department of Business and Industry, if you want to be a rideshare driver, you have to register as a business. Go ahead.
So you would say we need to consult with an attorney about this because it just seems kind of overwhelming wrapping my head around every single law that will particularly apply to our business.
It is overwhelming, but you don't have to consult an attorney. I would start with Google. I always start with Google. And then if I find that there's something like you go down a rabbit hole, there's another question in the back. You go down a rabbit hole because you say, okay, well, if this happens, then there's a regulation, or if this happens, then if it gets too complex with that, after writing out what you think it is, then I would consult with somebody, but you might be able to go to a SCORE mentor or an SBDC mentor to ask them what they know about that particular issue, and then decide whether you need to consult with somebody you're gonna have to pay. Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
I did that approach. I reached out to the health department on my end. I was doing an event and they were doing the health department thing, checking everybody out. They didn't check me out, but I called him over because I wanted to start serving samples. And I just asked him, hey, what can I do to start serving my samples of coffee, et cetera, et cetera. He said, do you want to pay or do you want to do it for free? I said, well, we all want to do it for free. So he kind of gave me a broke down method of how to do it for free where it's gray area, but they can't do anything about it. And then there's I forget the license you have to get to serve, but there's also like a cottage license or something like that you can get to legally serve it, as in
Yeah,
make
you
the
can get like a
coffee, do all that.
temporary business license too.
Yes, yeah. So I mean, he told me just to leave the water there and let them do the serving. All I'm doing is giving them the sample, and they're serving themselves. That definitely helps you with a little bit of change on
Yeah,
that end.
good trick.
Yeah, 100%. Gray area.
We like gray areas. Yes, Sal, how are you?
I just believe once you get to this stage, if you're in an incubator, if you're even, as sure that we are here, I follow the rule of thumb that my mentors told me is just establish BAIL. It's a good acronym. BAIL, BAIL.
BAIL.
Jail is what I was told. And BAIL stands for, whether you retain them or not, you just want to identify the individuals that represent BAIL and have them in your circle. And that's your banker, B. That's your accountant, A. That's your insurance broker, I. And your lawyer. And what I've discovered is most people are very, very generous with their time, very generous with their knowledge. And they're basically looking at you as someone that they're eventually going to you're going to retain their services at some point in time. So developing those relationships, I think those 4 essential. Anybody at this stage, even if you don't put the money down on them, just, identify who they are And those people tend to also be really, really great mentors and helping you build your business and avoid a lot of pitfalls in those areas.
Sarah has more advice.
Just to add on to it, I love that idea. And to add on to it, I love going onto YouTube and kind of learning all the different things and realize that each state has a lot of different regulations and so forth. To take this man's suggestion of going to somebody, usually they give you a 1 hour, a half hour complimentary type thing. Do all your research, write down kind of like what your questions are as much as possible, and just say, hey, here's the things that I am interested in learning. And don't just go to one person, go to a few different people. Like if you want to go to a lawyer, go to a couple of different lawyers, feel them out, see if you relate to them. Are they helping? Are they very helpful with you? And you can start seeing kind of some of the trends of what people say, what may be important for you. And then you also know, like, okay, I know who I want to go to if I really need to have legal or insurance or whatever. So it's a great way to really educate yourself and also figure out kind of in the future, as you said, who you feel comfortable working with.
Yeah,
Do
you
we
should-
want to jump online for questions?
Yeah, Madeline, any questions
Patty?
online?
Folks, if anybody has a question, feel free to come off mute. There are not any questions remaining in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else in the room?
We do have a raised virtual hand, so Michaela, go ahead and come up. Or are you just saying hi? There you are.
Waving, not drowning.
We see a face. We don't yet hear the voice. Technical difficulties. We can't hear you, but if you want to put the question in the chat, we'd be happy to. Or we can play charades if you'd like to stand up and act out your question.
So I can tell you, in Nevada, you should have a business license through the Secretary of State, the Silver Flume website, which they are revamping. I don't know when it's going to be done. And if you have a business in the city of Las Vegas, you also need a business license here.
You need both.
You need both. Any progress, Madeline?
Is in progress. I see the fingers typing.
Okay.
I had a question pertaining to software or SaaS license.
Yeah, that was very hard to hear.
Fernando, was that you? Can you speak louder?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we have wind noise too.
Is your
Just like
fan on, Fernando?
Just on like the SaaS licenses, is that something too even for Vegas and Nevada for coming out of here?
A SaaS license?
Yeah, because the main product is basically the public at large in any state. So I was just, I know one of the first classes was like, we don't really need a license, but we still do need an EIN, correct? If we're headquarters are here.
Yeah, you need an EIN. You should have a business license. And you may have to get a business license in every state in which you sell. So you should check that out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is that it, Fernando?
Yes, thank you.
Any
You're
other
welcome.
questions from online? All right, I think that's it.
Oh, please.
Okay.
One more.
We have a question in the room.
Okay, so you told him he needs a business license in every single state that he sells.
He may.
He may. So that applies to certain online businesses too, or?
Yes, it could. Yeah, I've had people write to me who are located in Wyoming, and Wyoming is close to Nevada, and they're like, well, now I've learned that I have to get an LLC in Nevada too, if you want to sell here. So,
And I will find a resource link to put in the chat. And there are people at the state level that are happy to guide folks through the process, but it totally depends on what industry you're in, how much revenue you have per year, whether you are e-commerce or not. There are so many variables that go into the business license requirements. So there's not really a straightforward answer. It's very case by case, but the resources are available to help you down that path.
You mentioned an online business, like, because I sell through Etsy, and so they collect a tax, right? So it doesn't really, like, I can still be based here. I don't have to open anything anywhere else.
I don't know. The question was, she sells on Etsy, and Etsy is collecting the state tax for whichever states require it. And then we hope that they're reporting and sending it in. But the question was, does she need to have a business license in each of those states? And I don't know. All right, well, it looks like our mentors are here. And if there are no more questions online, then we can, oh, let me get back to, oh, you have to touch the thing.
Oh, sorry.
Check in. If you didn't check in earlier or sign the sheet, please check in now. Try to stay out of the way. And when it comes to the mentors, does everybody know who they're meeting with? You don't? Okay. Nez, can you help the lady in pink? Okay. I think we're done here.
Okay, everybody online, thank you for joining this evening. Don't forget, come to Ignite. Going to be fun. Also, quick tip,
But, you know, come to class next Monday.
come to
also.
class next Monday. That too. Don't forget to. But it's the,
Yeah.
yeah.
We were just off Monday because it was a holiday. Oh, no, it's, yeah.
Also get your spot for demo day. Registration
Yeah.
is now open for that. It's not for funding, but it is with your friends to kind of get some practice and
Demo day
know
night.
that everybody's a friendly face. Okay, I think we are done. Karen, I see you and you didn't come in person. I'm very upset about that. Okay, I'll talk to y'all later.
Bye.
Bye.